Hi, friends. This week is a special week because this week I'm going to do an art swap with another creator. Some of you may already know my friend David, or Yeti, which is short for Sin City Yeti. He's been active on Instagram for a while and made some shorts here on YouTube, but he just recently made the jump into long-form videos. He's crazy stupid talented. Like, oh my god, seriously? But before I gush too much, let me explain what we're doing. David is going to draw inspiration from my past projects and characters and create something for me in his style. And I'm going to draw some inspiration from him and create something for him in my style. So first, let's take a look at some of his work. Okay, I have a plan. First, I'm going to start with a canvas. This way. And I'm going to start with an underpainting with some pink paint that I already have. I've been really wanting to try an underpainting like this, and I think the fancies call it toning the canvas. But I've been wanting to try it because it's supposed to help bring the color palette together a bit more by giving everything a unified undertone. And I like the way that it shows through in some spots. Like, you know when you're painting on a canvas and sometimes your brush doesn't get into all the texture and then there's like a little white spot? Or maybe the painting is a little thinner in some areas? There you would see the underpainting. My problem is that I am way too obsessive and I can't let something look uneven or have missing spots. So I'll go over it like 10 times. So we're going to see if I can actually allow myself to calm down and let the underpainting do its job. Alright, now that that's done, I'm just going to sketch out my idea really quick. Which I did off camera because it was a whole ordeal. I did it digitally because I wanted to practice digital art and I wanted the composition to be just right. So I didn't want to be erasing a million times to move things over a centimeter or make them slightly bigger. So after I was finally happy with it, I printed it out and used white transfer paper to trace it onto the canvas. But let's just get to painting. I'm going to start with the objects furthest in the background and work towards the foreground. I don't know if this is how most artists do it, but this just makes the most sense to me. Since things are going to overlap, it just seems like you'd want to paint the things in front, on top, instead of trying to make something like behind something else that's already there. That's a long-winded way of saying I'm starting with the sky. I'm trying to be nice and loose and not worry about making it opaque. I really want to let that underpainting do its work. I added a little bit of darker and lighter blues in for variation and just sort of blended it a bit as I went. And I can definitely still see some of that pink peeking through. Then, while that's going to dry, I'll move on down here to the grass. Because this is going to be a big old field of flowers. But do I paint from the top to the bottom because it's the back to the front? Or do I paint from the front to the back because I'm slowly getting darker? Or does no one even care because they're not as neurotic as me? I do have my printed out sketch next to me that I keep referring to because even though I drew this, I'm still getting confused what is what. I still painted this flower petal in green, so that's gonna look weird for a while. Also, another ultimately unimportant art question, but do people usually paint in the background completely and then paint over the top of it? Or do they do what I do, where I stay vaguely within the lines of my sketch and basically just color in my own painting? I mean, I guess it sounds more professional to paint the whole background and then paint over it, but I do not trust myself to be able to freehand anything with paint, and I don't want to paint over my sketch. Anyway, this field is looking a little, well, not wonderful, but it's gonna get covered with flowers, so I'm not even worried about it. Like, see this weird spot right here that's lighter than everything else? I'm not even stressing about that. That will work itself out later. Actually, no, I can't help it. Sorry, not sorry. Alright, one more slightly darker green at the top that doesn't really match the other greens, but that's what the pink layer is for, right? Also, not related, but there is a stink bug flying around the light above my head, and he sounds like a tiny helicopter. I'm not gonna parkour around the room trying to catch him. I'm just gonna let him tire himself out until I can relocate him, but he's really distracting me. Okay, now I'm gonna try something that I saw online that hopefully won't mess this up. I'm gonna take the only fan brush that I own and have never had a use for before, put barely any paint on it, and then make these little grass strokes. Also, I think I dripped water on the painting right here, but if not, the skull is becoming possessed. The top of the field looked a little choppy, so I used a super fluffy brush to sort of blur it out. For the last part of the background, I need to add some clouds up here now that the sky is dry. Clouds are really always the riskiest thing to add to my landscapes. They can come out really good, or they can come out really butt. So I'm using a small fluffy brush, trying to start with way less paint than I think I'll need, and build up as I go. And for some reason, every time I paint clouds, my brain forgets ever having seen a cloud before. And I cannot for the life of me remember what shape a cloud is in, but I don't think it's that. I was able to blend the edges out to make it nice and wispy, and then I added a little more blue back in to make it look more instead of And even though I am stressed about making this good because I really want to measure up to David's talent, I am really liking how this is going so far. Alright, let's finally start working on the focal points of this painting. First, we have this skeleton. David has this painting called Equanimity, which is obviously a skull surrounded by flowers, and these cute little skull butterflies. I really love this painting, the colors and the pretty but creepy vibe, so I knew that I definitely wanted to use that. But I adapted it slightly. I changed the pose to a nice, peaceful, meditating pose because I kind of wish that I was peaceful, but I probably never will be until I myself am a skeleton. I'm not complaining about that. I have always been a very anxious and stressed human being, my whole life. I am at peace with my lack of peace. I started off with an off-white base coat to fill in each little bone. And even though I used a reference, I am sure this is not anatomically correct. But whatever is wrong with it, just don't tell me, because I don't care. And I know this is a skeleton, but does it look extra frail? This guy has some serious osteoporosis. I went back in over each and every bone to add some shading and highlights and blend it while it was still wet. I'm not quite sure what I'm doing, but I'm just doing it until I like the look of it and then I move on. And because I figured out what worked and what didn't, it was moving a lot quicker as I got further along. I felt like he needed a slightly darker shadow, so I went in with a diluted sort of black, but then I felt like the skeleton needed to stand out a bit more from the background, so I added a super thin, teeny tiny outline. I just can't seem to help myself when it comes to outlines. Everything needs an outline. Now, I don't really paint intricate pieces like this very often, but when I do, this part is actually the part that I find the most relaxing. Just zoning in on one little section and going back and forth, altering it and adjusting it. It's incredibly time consuming, this skeleton alone took me one whole Harry Potter movie on cable, but it went by pretty quickly because I was so focused. While working on the hands, I kept getting confused with how many finger bones there were and where, because I kept forgetting that the pointer finger was up and adding 4 more fingers underneath it, so I might have focused in a little too hard. At this point in the painting, I'm still pretty nervous. Anytime I make something for someone else, I put so much pressure on myself to make it look amazing, and I wasn't 100% happy with it so far, just 80%, so still pretty high, but I was just praying that I didn't mess this up somehow. All right, so let's start over here with these flowers. So David paints a lot of bugs and bug-like creatures. And when I was looking through his paintings and reading the descriptions behind them, I saw this one called Wonder. We'll come back to that specific one later, but it's an orchid mantis, which is a mantis that disguises itself as a flower. So I thought, what if the entire flower field is filled with bugs hidden as flowers? And David also has this painting called Jaded, which has a few different animal inspirations, but one of them is a butterfly. So these flowers are going to have a butterfly hidden in them. I based the shapes off of lilies since I think they have a very butterfly-y shape, but I also wanted to pull in the colors from the Jaded painting, the blues and yellows, and I've never seen a lily in these colors, but what the heck, we'll just call these lilies anyway. Since I obviously couldn't find a reference of a lily in these colors, I am making it up quite a bit. And I really struggled with that yellow not being yellow enough, but after I added some white to make it a bit less transparent, it was flowing much better. After blending out the blue and the yellow, I had originally planned to bring some red accents in because there is also red in the painting, but these flowers were already very in your face, so I thought red might just fully reach out and punch you in the eye. I added some really dark veins down the center and then immediately told them to be a little quieter, and then I added those freckle things that lilies have. I added a little bit of shadow where the petals and butterfly overlap. And then those little pollen stems. I finished up the rest of the flowers, including that horrible one that I painted the wrong color, and then I moved on to the butterfly. I wanted to match the colors of the flowers and sort of blend in with its pattern, but I still don't want it to look exactly like the flower petals. It's still a butterfly. So I gave him those sort of splotchy butterfly spots. He's probably going to stand out either way with this thick, buggy body. I painted in some really quick stems, nothing fancy, just a too dark green that I decided I didn't like and completely covered up. While my palette was still wet, I added some flowers into the rest of the field using the colors of the lilies. They're not really defined, just kind of blobs that get larger and slightly more flower-shaped as they get closer to the front. I couldn't decide how many flowers is too many, so I went with there's no such thing as too many. I did actually add a little bit of that turquoisey green to some of the flowers, but I abandoned spending that much time on these small flowers really quick. And then I decided that the larger lilies needed to stand out a bit more, so I added, say it with me, an outline. Listen, I just really like an outline. I did use a really desaturated yellowy green, so it's not harsh, but the flowers still stand out from the background and each other. Alright, moving over to this right side, I think I used magnolias as the reference because this is the orchid mantis reference that I used, and the shape of magnolias looked the most like it. It would make sense that an orchid would look like an orchid mantis, but I'm just not seeing it. Plus, I can't imagine orchids grow in fields. Anyway, the orchid mantis that David painted is purple, but these are going to be pink because the reference that I had was pink, and I have a plan for some purple later. I did not even know that orchid mantises were a thing, so thank you, David, for that new information. And apparently they're native to Southeast Asia and pretty much illegal in the US. So we're just stuck with these basic gals. Now, rather than torture myself with blending some very different colors together, again, I'm just going to go in with a few different shades of pink, getting darker towards the base. Then I didn't even kid myself, and I went right in with the darkest pink to outline each petal. I worked flower by flower, looking at my sketch all the time so that I wouldn't get confused what I'm actually painting, because some of these spots over here are leaves. Except I still got confused, and this down here was supposed to be a lily. It's obviously shaped like a lily, and I specifically put it over here so that they would be a little more mixed and not three separate areas. But I got too focused on blending and painting, and I forgot to pay attention to the full picture. Why did I not realize this flower looked nothing like the others? It's not even on a branch. It has a stem. Also, I can't remember for sure, but I think this little one down here was supposed to be a tulip. Ding dong. Well, let's move up to the mantis herself. She's pretty much the same colors as the flowers themselves, just with a little green added in for the legs and on her head. She's so cute. I added all the pink flowers to the background before my paint dries out, and then I added in the leaves, which I struggled to make actually show up against the green background. There we go. I painted in the branches, and I just love painting branches. It's a really weird thing to say, and I don't know why, because they seem like they'd be really boring, but I just always really like painting them. Like when I do cherry blossoms, or when I redid that koala. Ooh, I finally realized that I painted the wrong flowers down there, and I was forced to turn this stem into a branch. Dummy. I went around all of the flowers with a desaturated greeny gray to make kind of a shadow so the flowers sort of stand out a bit more. Does it actually look better to you? Or is it just my brain that needs to find areas? Alright, this last section down here in the center is some tulips with a hidden spider. Okay, listen. I don't actually think there are spiders that hide themselves as tulips, so don't panic anytime you see a tulip. When I was trying to find more bugs that disguise themselves as flowers, I found this video. I can't really find any information on it, but I'm 100% sure it's not real. But it is still cool looking, and it fit the theme, so here we are. I'm using purple for these with a sort of lighter edge because I've seen tulips that have that like scalloped edge thing, and I thought that looked really cool. Plus, purple will fit. And I had a lot of purples to choose from. Weirdly, whenever I do paintings like this, I use all the same brand of paint, so I was using all my little tubes of Liquitex Basics for this. There's no rule saying that I have to, and I mix and match paint whenever I'm crafting, but for some reason, my weird brain insists that I need to use all of the same set of paint for one painting. That painting that I did for the Secret Santa exchange, that was all that reclaimed house paint line from DecoArt. So was this one. What a strange limit to put on myself. Either way, I basically painted these the same way that I did the magnolias, where I get darker towards the base, because I only really know how to paint flowers in a gradient. But I like it, so I don't really care. Like, look at them, they're so pretty. I think I'm just gonna paint flowers for the rest of my life. Also, maybe it's a placebo effect and I just think that it's working, but I really feel like this pink underpainting worked to give all of the colors the same cool undertone, so they look really good together. Like, even this darker green that isn't the best match is looking good. I mean, granted, I still painted over it with other colors, but I still think that underpainting is doing its job. Either way, I like it. Now, I'm not sure that you can tell this is a spider, so I added some giant eyes and the teeniest, tiniest little spider paws. Because if you looked at a zoomed in picture of a spider, they have paws. I still don't like them, but I feel just the tiniest bit bad about not liking them because they have baby paws. Then I of course added little purple flowers everywhere. And then I went back in with all of the other colors and added a ton more flowers in. Can you tell a difference? Here is the final painting. The original plan was to take a painting of each other's and do it in our style. And this is definitely how my heart and brain see David. And it must be my style because I drew it and painted it, but it's not really based off one piece or character. But I actually really love it. I was insanely nervous to start and very nervous as I got going, and maybe you can sense that sort of chaotic energy, but I actually had a ton of fun painting this, and I'm really excited for David to see it. All that's left is to pack it up and ship it off to him, and you're gonna have to head over to his channel to see what he thinks of it. But wait, don't leave yet because my package from David came. And please forgive the cobbled together footage in my messy craft room with terrible audio and my post-day job hair, but I wanted to record my first time seeing it live so you'd get the real reaction. David sent me this incredibly well-protected package with a handmade card and 2 other drawings. Ready?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my god! It's so cute. It's those little bunnies. And he's making a little bunny angel. I don't know what these things are, but he's got a little butt crack. My god. Spent so long on this. I just want to look at all the little close-up things. My god. It needs to be encased in glass so nobody can touch it. I'm just gonna stare at it for a while.
Okay.
You don't have to keep filming me staring at it. Thank you. This painting is insane. It's so amazing. The amount of tiny details in it, the shadows on every tiny gumdrop, painting is wrapped around the side, the way Larry and Snowberry are cuter than the ones that I made, and obviously the star of the show, Bebop. But also, these bonbons up here, oh my god, I love them so much. I am obsessed with this painting. I want to live inside it. Please make your way over to David's channel to see his video painting this for me, and let me know what you think about my painting for him. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.